Hello and very welcome to this interesting session when it comes to demystifying the strategic plan of Rotary. And I would just like to start with a short presentation, or just a thing to think about when it came to how all of this started. It actually started with a dinner party, a friend of a friend. And I got a message through Messenger saying, well, we are having a friend of ours who is an RI director, and she's wondering, or we are wondering, what do you say? Do you want to have a presentation about the strategic plan? And I said, yeah, that sounds interesting. So we've been talking and arranging this, and I think that's one way of showing and feeling the power of Rotary. You have a friend or a friend suggesting something, and we are people of action, so we can start doing it with just, well, it was maybe a month ago or 1.5 months ago, and now we're all sitting here connecting through different parts of the world, of course, mostly in the Nordic countries, but it's really great having this opportunity, and I will give the floor to you, RI Director Stephanie.
Thank you very much, DGE Ulf. I'm so excited to be with you, even if it is virtually. When we originally talked about this evening, I had mentioned I would like to talk about demystifying Rotary's strategic plan. Now I can see your faces already. Some of you are thinking, oh, how boring, oh, how dry. But listen, I promise in the time that I have with you, I am going to help you understand how we came about with this action plan, why we did it, and most importantly, what we're supposed to do with it at the club level. So Ulf is going to be my technical person, and some of the slides I'll stay on a bit longer than others, but he has volunteered to do that for me. So I'll simply say next slide, but we're going to start with this one. So the first thing I need to tell you is, why does it say action plan and not strategic plan? Well, the reason is simple. When the Joint Strategic Planning Committee was formed about 6 years ago, its mission was to create and find strategies that would push Rotary into a thriving future. But as Ulf has said, we are people of action. So we have changed it to become the action plan. So if you look on Rotary's website and start to look for information, it will be found under action plan. So if you'll go to the next slide. So how did we get started? So the very first thing that happened, as I mentioned, was we had a Rotary and Rotary Foundation visions or strategic planning committee formed. And the first thing that our committee did was look at each other and say, we are not writing a word of this plan. Instead, we are going to reach out to the Rotary world. We are going to ask people who are vested in Rotary. So on 3 separate occasions, we sent surveys to Rotarians, to Rotaractors, to former Rotarians, non-Rotarians, alumni, just about anybody for whom we had contact information. One of the surveys, you would have remembered the first one, if you got it in your inbox, because it was the first time Rotary had included pictures. We had pictures on that survey, and we asked respondents to indicate who looks like a Rotarian. Well, oh my goodness, that exercise in and of itself, depending on geography, culture, demographics, we had answers all over the place. So after all the surveys were completed, there were over 1 million that were sent. But we didn't stop there. We were working with a consulting partner from New York, and that organization had offices around the globe. So we decided to take advantage of that and use those locations and conduct focus group interviews. Now, if you have participated in a focus group, you know it's a little bit different than a survey. A survey is very individual. You sit at a computer and complete it, or you do it paper and pencil. But in a focus group, whether you're on a screen, on a platform, or in a room, you are with other people. And when the other people make comments or answer questions, it could trigger things in your mind that you may not have thought about. So focus group study is often referred to as a deeper dive into information. It's like peeling away the layers of an onion. So we did that. We had more than 400 participants, and we think we hit 29 different countries from around the world, and we think we hit every single zone. So after that was all done, we had input from all the zones, and we had reached all membership tenures, whether people had been in Rotary for 1 year, 5 years, 10 years. We had all ages, and we had all roles, people who had never had a position of leadership, all the way up to people who had been Rotary International directors. So we took all of that information. Next slide, please. We took all of that information. We started then to take a deeper dive into it. So we realized that we had a lot of focus group information. We had a lot of different people. This slide says 28 countries, but I'm pretty sure it was 29. So our job now was to go to that information and start to look for the big concepts, the big phrases that came out and indicated that these were things that people were interested in. And when we did that, we found phrases that we put together to create a vision statement. But before we sent it out to the world, we sent it again around all the different zones so that we could test it with geography and culture. And I'm glad we did that, because our original statement said something about Rotarians do the impossible. Oh my goodness, when the Japanese heard that, they said, no way. Nobody can do the impossible. So we stepped back and looked at the data again. And that's how we came up with the phrase create lasting change. Next slide, please. So you, I'm sure, have seen our vision statement. Together, we see a world where people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. This vision statement was well received all around the Rotary world. And I want to point out that the last 3 words in this vision statement are, to me, the most significant of any vision statement we've ever had, because it's the first time in my 31 years of being in Rotary that the organization is recognizing that when we help others, we are also helping ourselves. So that became a very important part of this vision statement. So the next thing we had to do was go back to that same data and look for information that was a little more about objectives, and a little more about strategies, and a little more about how are we going to get to this vision statement. And when we did that, we came up with the 4 priorities, and they are in the next slide. And you'll see them. One is increasing our impact. Another one talks about how do we expand our reach. And then we want to make sure our participants are engaged. And finally, we need to be able to say that we know how to adapt. So I want to spend a little bit of time on each of them and talk to you in a little more detail about what they mean. So our next slide focuses on increasing our impact. This is the priority that talks to us about how do we focus what we do? How do we measure what we do so that we are better able to tell stories to the world? I've got 2 stories here to tell you. We have never been really good about measuring impact except in one place. That one place is in our polio program. From the very beginning, we have been able to say, when we eradicate polio, there will be 11 million children that will not get a crippling disease. There will be X number of dollars saved every year from ancillary healthcare costs. We were able to make these strong statements that caught the attention of partners. You know, when we started in polio eradication in about the mid-80s, we had a handful of partners. Today, we have more than 12. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Gavi Vaccine Alliance, the World Health Organization, the CDC, they were all organizations that took a look at our story and said, this is a group that's really making an impact on the globe in world health. Now, contrast that with a project that we had a few years ago. How many of you were in Rotary when Ian Risley was president? Okay, do you remember what Ian asked us to do? Of course, he asked us to plant trees. A fabulous, fabulous project. And so what did we do? We went out and everybody planted a tree, 1 tree for every member in the club. And then we counted up all those numbers and we sent it off to Rotary. So what? We stopped short of looking for the impact. You know, there's always input, output, outcome, impact. So we really needed to talk about, what did planting those millions of trees do for soil erosion? What did it do for CO2 in the atmosphere? We didn't take it a step further, yet we could have. Was not a bad project. I hope we continue to do it, but we gotta get better at how do we measure and make sure that we're able to tell the stories. One of the things that has happened to Rotary over the years, and you'll know this if you've been in Rotary for a while, is that we do a lot of stuff. And we do things and we keep doing them, but do we really stop and evaluate whether or not they're still meeting the needs of the community? One of the best things we can do in terms of increasing our impact is work with other groups who are already assessing what's happening in our communities, and then figure out, how do we design projects that will work toward measurement and achievement? You may have heard that the Rotary Foundation has created a program called Programs of Scale. These are huge, huge international global grants that are meant to do just that. The first one that was awarded is in Africa for eliminating malaria. It's in an entire country in Africa. And when Rotary has been there and has done its work, there's going to be a story to tell about the work that we did and the impact that we've had. So let's move to the next slide and talk a little bit about the second priority. This is a priority called expanding our reach. You know, we really need to think about, how do we grow our membership and how do we get more people to come into the magic of Rotary? Our Council on Legislation in 2016 opened the door for us here, because that was the council that started creating the new models for Rotary clubs, the satellite clubs, the passport clubs, the e-clubs. There were different ways. I don't know how many of you have seen the Rotary Vimeo called Anytown. If you haven't seen it, I hope that you will look for it. It is, in my estimation, the very best video that Rotary has ever created. And here's why I like it. It tells the story of exactly what happens in my town. I think about my town where my Rotary Club is located. We meet on Wednesdays at noontime at a lovely location when we can. We've been on Zoom, but when we can, we meet at this lovely location outdoors. And I started to think about all of the people in this community who can't get away for a meeting, even if it's on Zoom, at 12 o'clock on a Wednesday, because maybe they have a work schedule. Maybe they're teachers and they're teaching, or maybe they're medical professionals and they have patients to see. And I'm thinking about how many people are we missing who really want to be great community servants, but don't have access to coming into the magic of Rotary. So that's why creating new channels is so important. It doesn't take away from our existing clubs. My club is a legacy club. It is not going to go away. I often say it's very much like what happens at a highway intersection. If there's nothing there, eventually a convenience store will come in on one corner, and then a gas station on another, and then a grocery store, and then a fast food place. Because of all that different traffic, there's more traffic coming through that intersection. So everybody benefits. So we want to think about how do we become more appealing to the people who want to do community service, but have not yet found it. You know, the other story I like to tell here is, you know, we need to remember that all of us have done Rotary in a way that was comfortable for us. But younger professionals coming up are going to want to do it their way. And, you know, I'm not going to be here forever. I love Rotary, just like you do. I love it. But when I'm not here, I want to make sure that there are people behind me lined up who can come and do Rotary in the way that they want to do it. You know, when I was a young woman, this will date me, I used to go out to disco dances and I used to wear high heels that were huge. And my father would grab me by the sleeve and say, "Where are you going with those shoes? You're going to kill yourself." And I'd say, "Dad, don't worry. We all know how to walk in them. We all know how to dance in them. It's what we do." And that's also true with people who want to share the magic of Rotary. They're going to want to do it a bit differently than we did, and that's okay. Let's move on to the next priority, and this is the one that talks about participant engagement. Now, when we talk about participants, we don't just mean members, we mean anybody who comes into this magic of Rotary. So it could be students or parents of students of the month, or it could be our interactors, it could be the beneficiary of our grant projects or our community projects. We want to think about how are we delivering value? You know, one of the things that comes to mind here is I often think about how many times I've heard Rotarians in the past talk about doing exit interviews, finding out why people are leaving. Well, that's the wrong time to ask. They've already made up their mind to leave. We should be talking to Rotarians coming in the door and continuously asking them, what attracted you to Rotary? What do you like about this organization? You know, what interests do you have? When we ask those questions of incoming members or prospective members, we're better able to target our programs, our speakers, our projects, and our club culture so that it really does deliver value to what people are interested in. Because when people don't feel that what they're doing is valuable use of their time, you know what happens? They walk with their feet. At the RI level, several years ago, I'm sure you heard that we partnered with Toastmasters International for this very reason, because we had heard that many individuals who were interested in Rotary wanted to come into Rotary because they wanted professional development. So Toastmasters and Rotary co-branded a product. And it is a product that's available on our Learning Center. And for those young professionals who want to develop better skills in public speaking, in project management, in leadership, they're able to access that through our Learning Center. So enhancing what we do for our members and the people who benefit by our service is really an incredibly important step. And finally, the next slide talks about priority number 4. And priority number 4 is increasing our ability to adapt. Oh my goodness, we are in overdrive in this one. Think about it. 14 months ago, the way we did Rotary was ripped from us. We had no choice. It was taken from us. Mary and Ivar Berg, who are on this call, the 3 of us were in the state of Virginia at a resort at a district conference. And on the first day of the conference, the then district governor stood up and very courageously said, by order of the governor of the state of Virginia, this conference is over. We looked at each other, we got really scared, we stayed overnight, and then the next day drove home. That was the last time I was at an in-person event in Rotary year 2020. And we have all changed. We have all created new ways. And you know, what's important here is that we have heard from Rotary clubs around the globe. It's estimated that 68% of Rotary clubs are doing some kind of virtual or hybrid meeting. Another 28% are flipping between the two, like my club does. And another small percentage are using their devices and simply calling members and checking on them and showing that they're being cared for. If you've heard President Holger speak, he often talks about caring for our members. And that's where this is coming from, building a culture of our willingness to take a risk and be there. This is also the priority that wants us to measure our governance and our structure, and to take a look at how can we do more things to get more people with diverse perspectives in decision making. I think back to my very first club. I was in a club with past president Charles Keller, and we were in that club together for about 10 years. And the treasurer of the club had been in the role for 34 years. Why? Why should somebody have that same job for 34 years? That's crazy. There were so many other people coming in and out of the meeting. We really needed to get more diversity in our leadership, but it simply didn't happen back then. Next slide. So the question is, how can leaders bring this action plan to life? And the answer is that we really need to get it into our club levels. Next slide. So if you are, and you all are, leaders in Rotary, I hope that you will challenge your district and challenge your club to do these things, increase their impact. The easiest way, as I mentioned before, to do this is to start with a community assessment. Figure out which issues are really important in your community, what needs to be handled. You know, one of the things that comes to mind for me during this past year is, you know, all of our Rotary clubs have figured out how to connect and have figured out how to serve. When I think about what they're doing, they're serving the elderly, and they're serving the medical communities, and they're serving the first responders. But there's a category of people who have been impacted by the pandemic that we haven't done anything for. and that's young people. Young people thrive on interaction and action, yet we haven't done anything for them because we haven't figured out what to do. So that to me is a need that we have in all of our communities. And I hope that all of us can figure out how we can look at doing something for young people because they've been neglected. Next slide, please. Challenge your clubs and your districts to expand their reach. Make sure that there are opportunities for people to come into Rotary in new and innovative ways. You know, in my community, there is an organization called Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania. It is a natural gas utility. And we knew several years ago that Columbia Gas was very much interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, Rotary 2 years ago came out with a strong statement about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we began to have conversations with Columbia Gas about doing things together, partnering. So we did some silly things like we had food trucks at our local outlet mall, and the food trucks were international. So there was a Mexican truck and an Italian truck and a Greek truck. So it gave people an opportunity to try international cuisine. We also co-sponsored speakers who came into the local school to talk about diversity and inclusion. Once the pandemic hit and everybody was working from home, our collaboration has stopped, except that we know that there are now people at Columbia Gas who are interested in Rotary. So Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania could become a new corporate club in our community. And all of the members would be employees of Columbia Gas of Pennsylvania. If you have visited our Learning Resource Center, you know that there's lots of information there. Courses about how to make your club more diverse and just a lot of information. You don't have to recreate anything. And it's always important that we tell the stories. You know, Rotarians have never been good about bragging. And I say, we have to get better. We need to humbly brag about what we do because that's how we show that Rotary makes a difference. Next slide, please. The next slide is our slide that talks about enhancing participant engagement. And this, you know, really has to deal with the retention part of our organization as well as the attraction part. I don't know if you knew this, but for the past several years, Rotary has been setting a record. We've brought in more people into Rotary last year than we ever did in our 116-year history. But the problem is we lost more people than we brought in. And that's not a good trend to have. So we really need to think about how do we hold on to the people who have come in. There's an interesting survey that was done by Rotary that shows that attrition happens somewhere around the second or third year. People come into our clubs, they get excited, they roll up their sleeves, they want to make the community better. Then after a year or two, something happens and their expectations weren't met. That's why I say, talk to people as they're coming into the club and as they're young in the club so that we can better tailor what's happening to meet what those expectations are. Next slide, please. And then our final challenge is to help our clubs understand how to increase their ability to adapt. And I don't think it's a surprise here that clubs have figured out how to do this. These are some other ideas for how to create that culture of a willingness to have innovation. You may have noticed that when I started, I said that the Strategic Planning Committee didn't write a single word of this plan. We didn't. Instead, we went out to the Rotary world. Why is that important? Well, it's important because we have a saying in the United States, I don't know if you have it in the Nordic countries, but people do not wash rental cars. And they don't do that because they don't own them. But when you give people an opportunity to participate, to be heard, to come up with suggestions, even if you don't use any of them, they feel that they've had an opportunity to have some input, and therefore they will feel the ownership. So one of the best things you can do, take this presentation, and it's on the website. You can find it under rotary.org/action plan. Take the 4 priorities, and whether you're meeting in person or virtually, divide the club into 4 and give each group one of the priorities and say to that group, how does this priority make sense for our club? Because you know your clubs better than any of us know your clubs. And when you get the input from the people at that grassroots level, that's when they will start to pay attention to the things that are going to change or should change, or you'll try to change. You also want to take a look, as I mentioned earlier, take a look at all the things happening in your club, the roles and the tasks, and make sure that they're still necessary and they're still important to be done. You know, Rotary has always been good at adding things, but never good at taking things away. So make sure that your clubs don't become that way, that because you want to have service activities and programs and speakers that meet the challenges of your community. And finally, next slide. I've already mentioned that you can find a lot of this information on the website. There is a strategic planning guide that you can use with your clubs. There's also a course called the Action Plan Learning Course. And I don't know how many of you have looked at the Rotary magazine lately, but I believe in all the editions, they are doing this full page ad, and each time it appears, it's one of the priorities, and they're calling them advertorials, and they're talking in detail about how Rotary is moving forward with each of those individual priorities. So I will stop here, DGE Ulf, and I will ask if there are any questions. I thank you all for listening. I hope it wasn't dry. I hope it wasn't too boring. And I hope it was useful so that you can take this information and share it with your clubs. Are there questions? Oh, thank you. Are there questions?
Well, I would just like to say thank you so much for this presentation. And I feel it wasn't dry. I think it was very interesting. And my first thought is actually now when we are moving out, hopefully moving out of the pandemic, I think this strategic plan should be very, very important. But at the same time, maybe it will be hard to work with it because I think many people want to recreate the old Rotary, that kind of Rotary we had 14 months ago. But how can we use this? Have you have any ideas on how to use this in making the new Rotary when we are more adaptable to virtual meetings, hybrid meetings, and well, everything?
Well, I think we just have to educate our members that we have learned lessons from the pandemic. Definitely, we've learned lessons. 14 months ago, I never shopped online. Now I'm doing it all the time. 14 months ago, if you would have told me I would have had a telehealth, a medical appointment, I would have said you're crazy. But that's proven me wrong. I've had telehealth appointments. So, and, you know, I've watched the number of Rotary clubs who have said, we've attracted newer members because we're now meeting online. And they couldn't come when we were meeting in a different format. And so I've been every single week since January, I have been asked to induct new members or charter new clubs. So that tells me that we have learned lessons from the pandemic. You know, and one of the ones that comes to mind is, you know, the pandemic forced us outside because it was safe to do that. And here we are about to embrace in supporting the environment. All right. That bodes so well for all of our Rotary clubs as we think about supporting the environment. You know, in the second half of 2020, binocular sales were up 22% because people were outside stargazing and bird watching. We got closer to the birds and the bees and the trees. So there are lessons that we can learn about how we gave more love to our planet because of what happened with COVID. Now, is all of this virtual stuff perfect? Of course not. We are always going to hold on to in real life experiences. But I think the answer is going to be, let's learn and let's see where hybrid activities are going to make sense for what we do where we are in Rotary. Any other questions? Oh, I love, oh, there we go. Stefan.
Yeah, I have a question, Stephanie. So thank you for your speech, and this was really interesting for me. But in all, I agree with that. But what I'm missing is the word friendship. And when I entered Rotary, when I became a member of Rotary, this was the main thing that we said, yes, we are friends together and we are close. And this is a more emotional moment, which is now in the strategic or in this action plan a little head-minded, isn't it?
Well, you know, it depends on, I think it depends on your demographic. You and I are in the same demographic. So for us, friendship means grabbing somebody, giving them a big hug, you know, shaking hands, looking them in the eyes. But when I talk to my niece, who is 25 years old, she tells me she has friends all over the world and she connects with them on her device every day. I don't know how they do it. I don't know why they think that's friendship, but apparently it is. So I agree with you. For those of us who are in very traditional Rotary clubs, we are going to want to do those in real life experiences because that's where we get the friendship. Absolutely.
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you for a great presentation.
You're welcome.
I have a question regarding the expand your reach. When it comes to your experience, what is the common mistakes that you think clubs make?
Well, one that I'm aware of is that clubs get threatened by the creation of a different club model in their community. So if there is a legacy club, they are threatened by starting a satellite club, or they are threatened by starting a second club that maybe meets at 5 o'clock in the afternoon instead of at noontime. And as I mentioned, I don't see those as threats at all because in general, I think all the clubs will have a better experience because there's more momentum for understanding Rotary. So that's what my experience has been. You know, in the United States, we have started a program called Innovative Club Advocates. And that position is at the zone level. And then our districts have identified a district innovative club advocate. And the purpose of these advocates is to look for underrepresented communities, underrepresented people in our locations who may not be in Rotary, but could be fabulous members of Rotary. For instance, in one of my zones, zones 34, we go all the way down the southern tip of the United States, and we have communities that are Spanish speaking, that are French speaking in the islands. So there's been some movement to start Rotary clubs that are language based, so that not everybody who is a non-native English speaker, you know, has an opportunity to join a Rotary club. They're going to feel comfortable in their own. We also have cause-based clubs. These advocates are looking for people who have certain interests that meld together. We have Rotary clubs that have joined together and banded to create ending human trafficking. We have had Rotary clubs connect to do work in and start clubs in veterans affairs, people who are interested in what veterans are doing. We've had clubs that have looked at ending hunger. So sometimes it's a cause that people are connected by, and that's what brings them into Rotary. But of course, we always remind Rotarians that we have 5 areas of service and we have 7 areas of focus. So although they have a cause that has brought them together, they're not limited to that cause because they have a lot of different ways that they could go.
Great, thank you.
If I can, I would speak to the fear of getting another club going. During my wife's year as district governor, we wanted to start a second club in our community, and our club was very much against it. And we had 35 members in our club. A year later, we did start the second club. And a year after that, they had 30 members and our club had 50 members. So getting Rotary more visible and giving more opportunities in your community really, I believe, attracts more Rotarians rather than scare them away.
Thanks, Ivor. That's exactly what my experience has been as well. Any other questions? Doesn't have to be about strategic planning. You have a director on the line, so anything's game.
Yes, I have a question. You said that we have the young people, they have had a hard time. We lost them somehow. And now Rotarys are much on the call in our district. And how do you think we could get the young people to join Rotaract as times are now?
Well, yeah, Elizabeth, that's an interesting question. You know, young people have shown time and time again that they want to serve, they want to make a difference. But because we went viral, and in some cases, clubs actually went dark for a while, we lost our ability to communicate with Rotaractors and interactors. And I think we need to revisit that. And we need to look at ways that our Rotary clubs can strengthen what's happening in Rotaract and in Interact so that we keep that pipeline together. You know, there have to be interesting and creative ways for Rotary clubs to do something that would interest and benefit their interactors and the Rotaractors. That's going to be different in every area and in every region. So again, I would challenge you as a district or as a zone to take a look at what's happening and figure out, you know, what's best. In my area, we have a lot of students who fell by the wayside because education went virtual. And our district is rural, most of it. We have the big city of Pittsburgh in my district, but after that, all the other counties are rural. So there were many students who simply did not have access to technology. So while their parents were trying to figure out, they lost jobs, they were downsized, they were trying to figure out how to get new jobs, they weren't paying attention to what happened to children. So that's an example of what I mean by we've let our children down, and we really need to think about how to get in there and move them forward again. I don't have the answer. I just know that it's a problem.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And now we have the raised hand from Kjell-Åke, Anders, and I saw Annika as well. So Kjell-Åke. I think you're still muted, Kjell-Åke.
Did it come? No.
Yes, you're good. Well, you were good. And then you went back on mute.
There we go. Thank you very much, Stephanie, for an excellent presentation. And from my point of view, I think it's very important that we now learn about the International Strategic Plan. But we have also to be very, very clear that we have to take it down to and break it down to district level and club level and down to the grassroots, because it's the grassroots from where we get our power. And when we get the grassroots, the Rotarians in the clubs involved, then Rotary also can grow. I have studied very much about how the clubs and the districts are working when we're talking about different strategic plans. I have found out that those districts and clubs where we have a plan, where we have involved the members, there you also have a success when we are talking about membership goals, involvement. They are very happy that they will also be able to give something back to Rotary, not just as paying the membership fee, but also taking part in different projects and so on. So this is my advice, that take it down to club level, let it grow, involve the Rotarians, then you will have a success. Another thing which is also very important, follow up. When you have made a plan, just follow up, just don't forget it. Put it into the shelf or wherever you have it. Let it be alive, keep it growing, and also involve that way the members. When we do that, then we have a future for Rotary. Thank you.
That is great, great advice, and you're absolutely correct. If this action plan stays at the RI level, our organization is not going anywhere. It must go down into our clubs because, as I mentioned before, each of you know your clubs better than anybody else. So when club members have an opportunity to work with these priorities and figure out how does that make sense for where we are, you're right, that's where they get the buy-in, and that's where they get the momentum to start to do things that are going to move the needle. Thank you. Great comment.
And now we have Anders and then Annika.
There we go. Sorry. First of all, thank you for a very good presentation. I was thinking a little bit about what you just said about talking about how to adapt to the younger generation. And then I was thinking of regarding the focus groups and the surveys, whether you had any specific, pulled any specific reports in relation to the that demographic, whether what they had to say regarding the future and strategy of Rotary, because they are the
yes.
new, they are that demographic.
Yeah. Yes, Anders, that information was shared with our strategic planning committee, but we looked at all information in an aggregate sense because, as you know, our main Rotarian base right now are primarily Rotarians over the age of 60. That does not mean that that's just going to be the same group, because people move and people transition and people die and things happen. Our hope is that we do take those lessons and look at that young professional group and move things further ahead. This past weekend, we had the final presidential conference, USA. Holger Kanak had 3 presidential conferences. He had one in Nigeria, I think he had one in Brazil, and he had one in the USA. And the whole idea behind the presidential conference was to give it to Rotaractors and let them create the conference. I've got to tell you, I've been to a lot of Rotary events, and this conference was splendid from start to finish. It was informative, it was entertaining, it was well done, it was technically superb. So there's a group right there, this Ascension MDIO, based out of Maryland in the United States, who is so passionate about Rotary now. And who knows Rotary better than our Rotaractors and our interactors? So yes, we do need to look at what we're learning from that group and listen to them and give them opportunities to put their skill set forward and help us move and grow as an organization.
Thanks.
Annika?
Yes, I think, you can hear me? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah. As I told you from the very beginning, I have been a Rotaract chair for 3 years in my district and a new generation chair for 1 year. And I have a daughter who has been a very active Rotaractor, and she's 33 years now. And what young people want to is to make good things in the world, as you told us, Stephanie, but they also want to know what's in it for me. Mm-hmm. In some way or another. It's not necessary, of course, in an economical way of thinking, but what's in it for me? What can I feel? What can I get from it from an emotional sort of way? And I think that that is what we have to think about. What we did was that we organized a RILA advanced course, which has just ended in our small university town. And it was a very big success. And we hope that from those young children, young adults, you would say, that we will have some Rotaractors and even Rotarians in our district. So I think we have to give them something in some way or another. We really have to think it very carefully so we don't lose that generation.
That's right. And Annika, I think not just giving them something, we need to give them what they're expecting, which is why it's always important when I say to clubs, ask up front, what is your expectation? Because when you ask people what they're expecting from the Rotary experience, then you can give and deliver what it is that they want. You're absolutely correct.
Now it's Gudrun, then Gunnar, and then I think we are going to end the session.
Yes, thank you again. I just wanted to hear your opinion about 3 terms or 2, diversity and then exclusivity. People talk about the right members. So what are your thoughts about that? Because those are quite contradicting in some way.
diversity means for our clubs, look around your community. And if your club mirrors what your community looks like, then you have a handle on your future and you have diversity in your club. So look at your community. Is your community, are there demographic issues? Are there male-female issues? Are there race issues? So if we look at our communities, let's make sure that our Rotary clubs look like our communities. And are we not leaving behind any underrepresented group when we talk about service to the community? In terms of, the other word was what?
Yeah, I don't know, exclusive, exclusive,
oh, okay.
Or yeah.
Yeah.
You know, there's some people, because I mean, the Rotary was built on the work network, which means that, you know, you should be high CEOs and things like that. And that's where you're targeting.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, when you think about when Rotary was founded in 1905, Paul Harris founded it because, where's Stefan? He wanted friendship. He was a young man in Chicago. He didn't know anybody. So he looked around the community and he found 3 other people and he said, let's meet every week and we'll just get to know one another. The service came later. So it was built on friendship first. So we should never forget that one of the core values of our organization, the first one, is fellowship. Then it's leadership, integrity, diversity, and service. It's fellowship. So we really want to extend the invitation for people to come into our circle because we are friendly and we are community servants and we are international servants, and that's what we do. Now, having said that, you also know that through the years, Rotary was also a very corporate organization. So it was CEOs and captains of industry, and in some parts of the world, it is still like that. However, as our cultures change, and there are more people who are doing things a bit differently, I think it's up to each individual Rotary Club to figure out what makes sense when you extend a request for a member to come to visit your club. That's the best answer I can give you.
Yeah, that was good. I think it was good that you mentioned that you have to reflect your community. I think that's very good because they do differ. Good, thanks.
You're welcome.
And now it's Gunnar.
Right. I think this meeting is actually a good example of an early change in what Rotary will do in the future. We're just starting to be global when it comes to communications this way. But it also carries a lot of possibilities that could be developed further in the strategic planning, since all of the projects that we have around the world become accessible on a direct communication level using IT, as long as people have the technologies available. We have started this journey from complete silence, no meetings over this Corona period, and then starting to add meeting to meeting. We had in our club a meeting with the embassy in Egypt last week. It starts up being possibilities here. We have had members who have started to think, should we carry on being part of Rotary or not, when there are so little activities that's physical. And then they start saying, wait, this is fantastic. This meeting was great. So we're actually, I think we are in a transition period where we will have a lot of meetings on a global scale in the future. And it will not be, as it is today, something that you have to do because there is no other means to have a meeting. You will have it because it expands your possibilities and your visions. And it can come into the, when it comes to the work environment, or it could be in when it comes to all of the different aspects of what Rotary is doing.
You're absolutely right. You know, since last March, I have talked to tens of thousands of Rotarians around the world in all kinds of imaginable countries. Had we not had the pandemic, I wouldn't have come close to meeting all of these Rotarians. Look at us on this call tonight. I've met so many cool people from the Nordic countries. It's been fabulous. We would not have had this chance to do this if it were not for the lessons that we're learning from the pandemic. So I absolutely agree with you, Gunnar. We will look at lessons learned. We will take the best practices, but that doesn't mean we're going to let go of the things that were important, because as Stefan reminds us, fellowship is always going to be important. So we'll still figure out how to get those fellowship pieces in there. Thank you all again for listening tonight. It was such a pleasure to be with you. I hope that you will take this information and use it in your club. As I mentioned, the easiest exercise of all is to just split your club into 4, give every group one of the priorities and let them go. And they will come back to you with amazing ideas of how your club can put these things into action.
Thank you, Stephanie, for this very, very inspiring hour we've been having together. And I hope before we end today, we will just have the official group photo. Since we can't do it for real life as we are used to, then we have to have this funny way of looking in small squares. That's the new way of having a group photo nowadays. So I hope everyone wants to join for this group photo to remember this great evening. So I am thinking if we can just smile, and I will take the photo, and there's. And thank you so very much. I will now stop the recording, and thank you so much for all of you participating tonight. Big thanks.